Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name's Jay, and this week I want to talk about the Switch 2. It's been a couple of weeks since it was announced, and it's taken me a little bit of time to just digest and take in what's gone on. Of course, in that time, the pre-order window has been and gone, so we'll talk about that as well. But what I really wanted to do was just share some of my thoughts on what we got told by Nintendo in that deep dive in the Nintendo Direct. So I'm going to ramble a bit about Switch 2. If you're not interested in the Switch 2, then this probably isn't the video for you. But if you've been looking at it and you've got some thoughts, or you want to know what other people are thinking, then I'll share my musings. It's just my thoughts, just my views. But let's have a chat. So it's been a couple of weeks now since Nintendo announced the Switch 2. And I wanted to spend some time, just now that we've had time to digest and we've watched the reaction videos and we've dug a little deeper after the Direct where Nintendo have shared more information, and just bring together some of the key things that I've picked up on that were important to me in the process now of deciding whether or not to pre-order one of these things. And also want to let you know what I did around the pre-order process. Did I get one? What did I get if I got one? And I'll share that at the end. So let's start with what Nintendo announced. And let's just get into the Switch 2 details before we start thinking about what we are and aren't buying. So first of all, if you didn't see it, the Switch 2 has been announced now by Nintendo, and it is coming out on the 5th of June. So at the point of this video going live, it's less than 2 months away, which is really exciting for someone who loves a console launch. Now, we got told lots of stuff about the Nintendo Switch 2. We got hardware information, we got game information, we got pricing information, and some of that has caused some controversy, which we'll talk about. But let's start with a bit of a hardware roundup, and I'm not deep diving here, so these are some of the top level stories, just in case you've seen it and you don't want to listen to it all over again. So first of all, we are getting a bigger HD screen, 1080p in handheld, which is much needed, much appreciated by me at least. A little bit of disappointment that it wasn't an OLED. I think it is an LCD screen, but to be perfectly honest, I think that's understandable given the price point here and what this is. This is your entry-level device. I'm sure Nintendo will go down the route like they did with the Switch to provide some sort of an OLED model in the future, or a Pro model or something like that. That now seems to be the trend. But we've now gone from the restrictions of the previous Switch generation to at least full HD. And also, I think for most games, they're also talking about 60 FPS up to 120 FPS, depending on the game and how it's optimized. So that's pretty cool as well. We also got a new dock, and I'm only mentioning that now because it links to that screen resolution story. The new dock now is enabled with a fan to keep the device cool, but critically, it is now taking your game footage up to 4K, which again is a much needed and much appreciated upgrade as far as I'm concerned from the previous generation of Switch. So we've got a new bigger screen in handheld mode with a lovely HD screen and 4K when docked. So we'll see how that all looks when it comes out. Storage wise, we're up from 32 gigabytes of internal memory to 256, so plenty of room for your Switch games. Now, of course, everyone's going, oh, that's so much bigger than the original Switch. Think of how many games you'll be able to store on there. And like any console generation, those games are just going to be bigger, aren't they? They're going to absorb more space. But it does mean that you can get lots of your original Switch games on there as well. And we'll talk about backwards compatibility later on. The hardware also supports a newer, faster memory card, which again appears to start at around 256 gig and around the £50 mark. I will be waiting probably a little bit post-launch for one of those, and looking for more like a terabyte, I think, for me personally. But anyway, great. And again, referencing the hardware changes that Nintendo have made, there is now a need for a faster micro SD card. So you can't buy the ones off the shelf. You need the express ones now, that newer SD card that the Switch is going to support. As well as the screen getting an upgrade, of course, the Joy-Cons were well overdue for one as well. They are now bigger. They have bigger R and L buttons and bigger sticks. Although, interestingly, no mention from Nintendo as to whether they've managed to fix the stick drift issues that plagued the first Switch. I've got to imagine that they have, given the amount of trouble and noise there was. I'm not sure if Nintendo ever fully admitted culpability there when it came to the original joystick problems, and if they did, they're certainly not going to shout about it in the launch of their brand new console. So, you know, I would imagine they've probably done something there, but we'll have to wait for the teardowns to find out. The Joy-Cons now attach slightly differently as well, so those bigger R and L buttons are also are metal, because the console is magnetic, and they are now attached via magnets, which I do think is really clever. those rails, although they worked and they were a bit novelty, I think magnets are going to make that much easier to pop on and pop off, and hopefully will be nice and strong when they are connected. I think like a lot of people, there are some initial concerns when I saw early mock-ups, which is that the connectors themselves are sort of like the bits of board, I don't know what you're going to call it, data board, that kind of stick out the console and then interface with the Joy-Cons. They look like they could be a bit fragile, so hopefully in all the stress testing that Nintendo have no doubt done, that hasn't been a problem, but we'll only find out, I guess, once it's in the hands of everyday people. The Joy-Cons also have another trick up their sleeve, which I have to say I think is really interesting, which is now that both the Joy-Cons can be turned on their side and used as mice, which I think will either end up being really gimmicky, and it'll die a death like the IR reader that Nintendo built into the Switch itself, or it could be the game changer for Nintendo. And the reason that I say that is there's two specific genres that spring to mind for me, and I'm sure you've got your own ideas as well, as to where this becomes really interesting. So first of all, for me, it'll be any kind of RTS game. One of the only reasons, if I'm honest, I ever gravitate back to a PC when I want to play a particular type of genre of game, and that is kind of point and click games, much like 2 Point Hospital or something like that, 2 Point Museum, which I've been playing on PS5. I actually got around that okay with a controller, but had I had a mouse, that would have been a game changer for me. And of course the other one, which is less sort of prominent in my life, but certainly one that will interest fanatics of the shooter genre, is the mouse controls of a shooter, finally giving you a degree of parity with a PC player. So if you can have the comfort of a Joy-Con in one hand to control the movement of your character, and then aim with the mouse, which they have said is a control scheme that will be available in Metroid, which again we'll talk about, then that's really interesting to me. So I don't know, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. Is this mouse going to be novelty and throwaway like the IR reader, or is it going to get properly supported, and are we going to see a slew of games that really benefit from that? Will it put pressure on the likes of Xbox or PlayStation to do something similar? I know there are hack ways to use a mouse and keyboard on those consoles, but do we want to see that support in the controllers in some way? And then the real accessory change on the device itself is the addition of the C button, which had everyone chatting on the internet before it was thoroughly announced as to what it was. I'll be honest, I thought it was a little bit of a letdown when they first started getting into it. It's effectively the GameChat button. But then as I've thought about it, I thought, actually, this is really quite clever. I really like the idea of this. They showed some of the footage of the chat mode, which of course, has been something that Nintendo has lacked for a long time. They had a degree of it through the mobile app for a little while, but that didn't seem very functional. Not very convenient, and I know they're trying to protect their child and family audience, but I think everyone now just expects chat. But I think the way they've done it is actually really clever. And although when I was watching the Direct, I thought the screen share specifically, which is where the other users that you're chatting with can share their Switch game experiences with you and you can see what they're doing, and that's whether you're playing the same game or just entirely different games. It looked a bit janky at first, and they didn't try to pretend that it was really smooth footage, and that makes sense because imagine the bandwidth that would take up trying to stream 4 different video feeds in full quality. But actually, when I thought I slept on it and I went away and thought about it, and in fact I found myself playing my PS5 the other night with a friend. We were playing different games. He was on PC and I was on PS5. We were just chatting over Discord, which is a great experience. But I wanted to see what he was doing, and he wanted to see what I was doing, and there was just no way to do it. And I thought, wow, actually, now as I reflect on that game chat functionality and that ability to share screens, I think how clever that is, and it's something that I definitely could see myself doing. Now, I'll be honest and say, I don't know how many friends I'll have on the Switch when it comes out, but if you are playing Switch 2 and you'd like to do some game chatting and sharing, I'd be up for that. Certainly, if nothing else, I want to test it out, so let me know. But yeah, so initially, I was pretty underwhelmed by that, but having had some time to reflect on it, I actually think it's a really good addition, and I'll be interested to see how well it works in practice. Let's talk a little bit about the accessories then, while we're still on the topic of hardware, and specifically the very interesting use of the camera. So Switch 2 is getting a brand new camera accessory that when it was shown throughout the various demos, it looked like it played a part in the game chat experience. It has a role to play in the living room when you're doing couch co-op. They showed examples like Mario Party Jamboree, where your face replaced kind of a character icon, and you had a real-time face attached to that, and it was tracking multiple people in the same room and displaying their images against their relevant characters. So that looked pretty cool. They also showed it being used a little bit like the Kinect, dare I say, an accessory that I thought I actually really liked. I think it was a little bit ahead of its time and perhaps poorly supported by software, but a really interesting and I guess under-supported, underutilized idea. But it looked like we had some kind of party games where your body movements were being tracked by the camera as well, which is really interesting. What I did notice, and I'll come back to this in a little bit more detail later with the order, is that as well as the official first-party Nintendo camera, there is also a much more interesting and funky novelty camera, although it turns out that there's a serious resolution difference between these two cameras. So the official Nintendo one, full HD, but we'll talk about the other one a little bit later. They also showed a brand new Pro Controller, which I have to say I thought was a little underwhelming. It looks an awful lot like the original Pro Controller with a C button, which is fine, I guess. I have to say I like the original Pro Controller. I thought it was very good. And if it isn't broke, maybe don't fix it. And they also announced to accompany that a GameCube controller. Now this is a really interesting one because I actually have the GameCube controller from the original Switch, which was predominantly geared towards Smash Brothers, and that was the main reason that it was kind of released and announced. This GameCube controller can only, currently at least, be ordered directly through Nintendo, and you had to have had an invite, which we'll come to later. And it's there to do, I assume, support the likes of Smash Brothers, but more critically, it's the addition of GameCube games coming to Nintendo Switch Online, which I think is really interesting because it gives it far more appeal than just having it for Smash Brothers. So, you know, being able to have that controller and play a library of games that best support it will make the emulation, I guess, for Nintendo a whole lot easier for those people who've got it, and their experience will feel more authentic. But it just gives you more reasons to buy that controller and use it. So interesting to see how that all pans out when it's released. I am also interested, and it hasn't been fully confirmed yet, in the compatibility of the new console with old console accessories. So I know Nintendo have confirmed that Joy-Cons from the Switch 1 and first-party controllers will work with the Switch 2, obviously limited in terms of the experiences that they can deliver. So if a title requires features that only the new controllers have, then they won't work. But if you're playing older games, then you'll be able to use them. They haven't confirmed yet whether that will be true of third-party controllers, of which we have 2 or 3 in our household. I think they're all Power A, and they're really good controllers. We've got a Mario one, a Zelda one, an Animal Crossing one for each of the family members who play the Switches. So I'm really hoping that Nintendo are also supporting those, and that those Bluetooth devices will also work on the Switch 2. I can't see why they wouldn't, but you just never know. So we touched on GameCube coming to Switch 2 with membership, and I have to say I really like this idea. I know a lot of people have been clamoring for GameCube through the online store, or just the ability to buy them on the store. So I think this is a really nice addition, and it gives an incentive, I suppose, for the Switch 2 online membership, and makes it worth buying, especially as you're moving over to that platform. Some great titles in there. Some of the Pokemon games I noticed in there, which you know, when they're physical at the moment, they are quite expensive. So it'll be interesting to see from a collector's perspective whether there's any knock-on effect of the Pokemon games and other titles that are perhaps a little harder to come by coming to that digital forum. Does that lower the price? I think we did see a knock-on effect when Paper Mario was remastered on the Switch. Now it's a little bit different because it was a paid-for experience that you could also own physically. This is kind of online games through membership. But it will be interesting to see if the availability of these now being more broad does bring down the price at all of the original software. Which brings me neatly onto the pricing controversy. So I don't know where to start with this, I'll be honest. I actually am not too deeply offended by this, and I don't have a massive issue with it, but I'll run you through kind of what's been going on and what's being said. So the first thing I think is that people have mentioned is that the console itself is a little higher priced this time around than the Switch 1 was, 7 or 8 years ago, however long that was ago. Now, I don't mind that personally. I think at $395 as it is the core console in the UK, it's kind of got parity with the Xbox Series X and with the PS5. Now, those consoles themselves now are 4 or 5 years old, so I'm sure when we see the next iteration of both their hardware, due to all the reasons that the cost of living in every other place in our lives has gone up, this will probably also have a knock-on effect. And we certainly saw that with PS5 Pro trying to make £700 acceptable for hardware. And of course, they got a lot of stick for that as well. So, they'll see where that goes. I'm sure Nintendo will make more affordable versions in time, like a Switch Lite, etc. They did it with the Switch 1, and I'm sure they'll do the same here as well. And to be perfectly honest, we are dealing with more advanced hardware and potentially more advanced costs in terms of production. So it is what it is, I think. And I think we're talking, what is it, £50 to £100 more? I can't remember what the original Switch launched at. I think I paid $350 for the Switch OLED, which I'm sure was about £50 more than the original price of the Switch. So it's a decent jump in price. We are talking 7 years, and companies just can't afford to make losses like they used to on these things anymore. It's a highly competitive area. I don't think the price of the console, though, was quite as controversial as the price of the games. Now, there's a few different angles to look at from this. So first of all, there's basically 3 ways you can get games now from Nintendo. You've got fully digital, which seems to be their preference, at least from a pricing point of view. You've still got physical in some instances. And then you've got this kind of weird middle ground, which is what I think they're calling the Game Cart key or something to that effect, which is basically a cartridge in a box, as you would expect a physical game to be, but all that game cartridge does is unlocks the download of the game. So it's digital as well. Now, this is a difficult one to unpack, but let's think about it. So first of all, I think this time round, the pricing difference between physical and digital actually makes sense, even if as a collector, I don't like it. And what do I mean by that? Well, in the past, it's always seemed really odd to me that I could go on to Amazon on the day of release of most video games and buy it for £5 to £10 cheaper than it was currently set for digital release on the relevant Xbox or PlayStation store. Normally PlayStation, because they keep their prices crazy, crazy high. And that always made no sense to me, because surely it's more expensive to produce a plastic case, a printed sleeve, burn a disc, put the disc in the box, package it at a warehouse, distribute it across the world, and sell it in a physical store, or from an Amazon warehouse. Surely that has got to be more expensive than simply moving a digital piece of data around via a server to your device. So it always seemed weird to me that the pricing of physical was less than the digital. And it certainly didn't encourage a move to digital, not in my mind anyway. Now with the Switch 2, Nintendo have gone the other way. They have first of all raised their prices, which I think they're not massively out of line with video games from other vendors, with the one exception of Mario Kart, which we'll talk about. But they've also put quite a gap between their digital cost and the physical cost. So let's take Mario Kart as an example. Now, I'm in the UK, so I'm going to talk in pounds sterling. I'm sure your conversions are similar in your own countries. So Mario Kart, $74.99 is its current list price for physical. Now, that is a jump in physical games. Nintendo games were typically 50 to 55 in the UK at release. You look at PlayStation and Xbox, they've been getting closer to 60, 65. RRP at 70, but very rarely sold at 70. So £75 for Mario Kart is a big jump. And it seems to be unique to Mario Kart, because Donkey Kong Bananza, which is their other first-party release coming later in the year, is already up for pre-order at $66.99 for physical. Now, if you look at the digital costs for both those games, so let's do Mario Kart first. So Mario Kart digitally is the same cost as Donkey Kong physically at $66.99, which puts it in at what, £7 or £8 cheaper to buy it digitally than buy it physically. And if you attribute that cost to all those things I just described, maybe that makes sense. Donkey Kong is $58.99, so again, similar drop in price. That's that £7 or £8 point. Now, first of all, let's also talk very quickly about the other Mario Kart angle. So as well as Mario Kart being £75 physical or £67 digitally, of course you can also get it for about £35 if you buy it as part of the console bundle, which I imagine most people are going to do. And I think the sell-through rate on Mario Kart World is going to be phenomenal, because I think so many people are going to buy it with the console. So just to quickly touch on those prices, console, no games, $395.99 in the UK, or $429.99 with Mario Kart. So less than £35 uplift. It's half the price of the digital game, broadly speaking. You get that bundled in. Who's not going to do that? Anyway, what I wanted to touch on here, I'm not overly offended by the pricing point. I think games are probably overdue a bit of a price lift in terms of how much they are to make, securing roles and futures for developers and careers, and if it trickles down into that, then it's probably not a bad thing. I guess the cynic in me probably expects that won't be the case. I suspect what will end up happening is the trickle down will be to the people that make the money, the execs, the people whose bonuses are paid out of this stuff, and we'll still see the real extreme volatility in the developer space. So I don't know. I don't know where to land on this one, to be honest. I think as a collector who loves to look at shelves full of retro games and all the games that I buy, I think this is where it gets more interesting for me, at least. And what I wanted to talk about is, does this signal the death of the physical game? Is it the end now of physical releases making sense? Is it easier as a collector now to justify spending £7 or £8 more, so what's that, like 10% of the overall price, to own the physical version versus having the digital? I don't know. It does look like Nintendo are going to make the digital space a little easier from a sharing perspective, at least within your families, so that's helpful. But I will miss having those boxes on a shelf, so I don't know how I feel about it. I really don't know. Having said that, the flip side to this, which I also think is worth discussing, is the game cart key piece. Because to me, I think for a long time now I've accepted that the discs I buy, at least for modern consoles, are not really the game anymore. It's not like going to, you know, a gaming market and picking up an NES game or a Super Nintendo game or even a GameCube game and taking that home, sticking it in the console and just playing the game. You know, that is not the world we live in anymore, and it hasn't been for a few console generations. I'll give you Cyberpunk as an example. I bought the Xbox One Cyberpunk on release and didn't put it in for about a year because of all the controversy going around it. I wanted it to be fixed before I even tried it. So in reality, the disc that I own for Cyberpunk is not the game that you play now. It's a very broken and janky experience that I imagine there's really no way to run unless you attempt to install it on an Xbox that's offline, if you can even do that. So it's been a long time since the game you get on the disc is even the game anymore. So does a cart that unlocks a digital download really differ too greatly to a disc you can't run without an update? I don't know. What I will say is that I think it makes reselling of those games much more feasible. So instead of a code in a box, which has become a bit of a thing at the back end of the Switch's life, which I really hate, what is the point in a physical bit of plastic, especially when we talk about environmentally friendly, you know, world that we need to live in now and the impact of plastic and landfill, etc. What is the point in putting all these boxes out that contain digital download codes and nothing else? There's no reason to really hold that. Like on a shelf, what does it mean? You can't pick it up, play it in 10 or 15 years time unless you've still got access to the Switch, the account, the digital download. I quite like the idea though of and you certainly can't resell it. That was the thing I was going to say. That's the key thing here. You can't do anything. Once you've redeemed that digital code, if you don't like the game, you can do nothing with it, which has always been a trapping of digital. At least with a code on a card key or whatever they're calling it, at least you can put that back in the box and sell it on, and somebody else can enjoy that experience. Or you can put it on the shelf and you've got the little cartridge. I don't know. I'm waffling a bit here because I don't know where I land. I don't know where I fall on this. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring it up. There is also one other thing I haven't touched on from a game point of view, but we're going to talk about that now in terms of what your options are. And I wanted to talk about, in the next section of this video, the launch games and that kind of roundup. So first of all, one of the big pluses I think for Nintendo here is backwards compatibility. Now that's a big deal for me because we've got quite a Switch library now in this house. I've been buying more physical recently as I've moved away from digital and got back into collecting. And my son, who is now a big Nintendo Switch fan, has also built up through birthdays and Christmases a decent library of Switch games. So the fact that those games can be carried over to the Switch too is really appealing to me. It means I don't have to keep another piece of hardware. My current OLED Switch can go into the household and somebody else can enjoy that, and I can play on a Switch too, as and when I get one. So I think the backwards compatibility is a big win, and I'm really pleased to see that from Nintendo. They're not trying to force us to buy all these games again on the next console. If you've got it, you can still play it, and that's great. And even it even uses the same port. The only difference between the cartridges is that the Nintendo Switch 2 cartridges will now be red, which will help you differentiate them. In terms of the games that have come out, I'm not going to run through every game that was announced in the Direct. I'm really personally only that interested in first-party Nintendo games. There was an impressive amount and a variety of games announce. Absolutely no question there. But I'm not really bothered, about playing some of those experiences from the third-party studios, of which there were plenty. Really, really positive to see how many third-party studios are behind this. But for me, I'm going to play those third-party experiences on a more powerful console, on a PlayStation or on an Xbox. Having said that, I'm sure there'll be examples where the portability of the Switch versus that of the PlayStation or Xbox may just be the tipping point, and that may sway me to buy that experience elsewhere. Although if rumours are to be believed, PlayStation aren't a million miles off a true successor to the PSP and the PS Vita, and Xbox are also entering this market, so who knows where we're playing portable games in the next 5 or 10 years. Obviously the biggest announcement was Mario Kart World, which I'm super excited about. I'm a huge Mario Kart fan, and although we got a slew of extra tracks for Mario Kart 8 during the Switch life cycle, we were all still ultimately playing a game that was built and released on the Wii U, a previous generation before. So Mario Kart World, a true sequel, successor to Mario Kart 8 for the Switch 2, is super exciting, and the fact that it's open world is really interesting. I'm a little hesitant about the open world bit, and I have specifically steered clear of any of the additional information following the baseline direct. I don't want deep dives on the game. I don't want to see all the tracks and have it spoiled for me. So I'm going into it blind. I'm hopeful. I'm a Mario Kart lover, have been ever since the SNES. I've played the hell out of every Mario Kart they've ever made. So I'm super excited for it. But I am a little nervous about this open world piece. I hope it's not too intrusive. I hope it doesn't take away from the core experience. My example of that would be Burnout Revenge becoming Burnout Paradise. I personally loved Burnout Revenge and most of the Burnout sort of early games. I enjoyed Paradise, but the open world kind of killed the flow for me a little bit. I like that kind of progression of going to a tournament, win the tournament, move on to the next tournament, rather than the freedom to roam the world. So let's see how they've implemented it. Benefit of the doubt, Nintendo are excellent at this stuff, and Mario Kart is a franchise that this household absolutely adores. So very, very excited for that. We also saw Donkey Kong Bananza. That was how the Switch Direct was ended, which, again, I would say I'm not massively fussed about. I am wearing a Donkey Kong shirt. I do like the character, and the game does look fun. I know, though, my son will absolutely adore that game. So whether I'm that bothered about playing it or not, it will get purchased and it will get played, and I will no doubt have a hand in helping him to play that game. So I'm really excited to do that with him. For me, the other first party game though that really has me excited is Metroid 4. I know we've waited an awfully long time for this, and of course it's a Switch 1 and 2 release. It's going to be better on the Switch 2, surely. It supports mouse mode, which I may or may not play, but Metroid is a must-buy for me. I still have incredibly fond memories of the original Metroid Prime on the GameCube. That was my first entry point to a Metroid game. I never played the 2D game, so to me Metroid is that 3D experience. And although I know that a lot of people prefer original Metroid and the Metroidvania, the 2D format, etc., for me, my experience of Samus and that world was in 3D via the GameCube. So really excited for Metroid 4, and one I shall definitely be jumping into. And then, to be honest, like I said, a lot of the third-party stuff, not too fussed about, but what really got me interested, and I have to confess something here as I explain why, for me it was the Switch 1 editions, or Switch 2 editions, sorry, of games on the Switch 1. Now we've got in our house Mario Party Jamboree, very, very popular with my children, and I'm sure we'll be enjoying the expanded version of that that comes to Switch 2. What I was really interested in, and what really caught my attention, was the two Zelda games, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, I own both those games. I put several hours into Breath of the Wild, but never really made any meaningful progress, and that was I probably played that at it, probably most of that time, if not all of that time, was in the first year of the Switch's release. I haven't been back to it. I keep meaning to, I keep wanting to, but I've just never done it. And I have to admit, when it first came out, I was very impressed with it, but the graphics didn't blow me away. Not what it's about, it's not what it's there for. And the performance was okay on the Switch. But there were competing things for my interest at the time. I think Horizon Zero Dawn came out at a similar time, and although a lot of people favoured Zelda, I was suckered in by the graphics and the dinosaurs, and Horizon took my attention away. I bought Tears of the Kingdom, fully expecting to jump into that instead, and I've just never got round to starting it. So it's sat in the box, it's never been played, and I've yet to experience it. But again, in hearing a lot of the feedback, and I know it's an excellent game, a lot of people said that it was really stretching the Switch hardware and that it was struggling to keep up. So part of me thinks that maybe now, with Tears of the Kingdom being revamped with its expanded edition and better frame rates and better graphics, that this is the time to jump in. So when I do get a Switch 2, whenever that may happen, I'm really excited to jump into to Tears of the Kingdom. I don't know if I'll go back to Breath of the Wild and carry. I don't even know if you'll be able to carry on playing your save game. Will you? Don't think they've confirmed that. If you know any more than me in the comments, please let me know. But I would like to play Tears of the Kingdom on that new console. That's going to feel like a brand new experience to me, and it's going to run in that beautiful kind of up-resed, I suppose, powered up, whatever you want to use as a term, but very excited for that. And like I said, loads of other games, loads of other announcements, but these were the things that really took my attention and that I wanted to talk about. So let's get wrapping up of this video and let's talk a little bit about my pre-order situation. So first of all, I have to say, when the Switch 1 was originally announced many years ago, I thought it was stupid. I thought it was a bit of a disaster. I thought the direct that they presented it through was laughable. I just did not understand what they were trying to do, and it felt like they hadn't learnt from the Wii U, and I thought, oh god, this thing is destined to fail. Now, obviously, I was so very wrong because it's been a wild success. One of the biggest successes Nintendo's ever had, one of the best-selling consoles ever made, and and we've got a couple of them in our house, and we've had huge amounts of fun with them. So yeah, I was very glad I was very wrong. I'm not an expert. It's just one man's opinion. So when I went into the Switch 2, I don't know what I was expecting. I was kind of hoping Nintendo would blow me away, and I don't think they did. I think there was it was a really good direct. Lots to enjoy. But I was maybe waiting for something a bit more Nintendo, a bit more radical, a bit more, whoa, they're going in this direction. And it didn't really do that. It felt quite safe. But then I absolutely understand why that is. They've had one of the biggest successes in the gaming industry. Why would you immediately deviate from that? Most people are just looking for that experience with more power, with greater visuals, more games, and more of the same. And that's what the Switch 2 really feels like to me. And in the same vein, I suppose I don't see a Switch 2 replacing my mainline consoles. I've said before on the channel, I used to be an Xbox guy, and then this generation I've really pivoted to PlayStation, and I'm really enjoying that console. I don't see a new Switch, unseating that as my main console. But I've been a Nintendo fan since I was a boy, and since the NES, and that won't change. So I want one, and I will play all the first-party games. I will play the new Marios, the Zeldas, the Metroids, all of that good stuff. I just don't need it for like an Elden Ring or something like that. That's just not what I want it for. So, have I pre-ordered one? Have I been able to pre-order one? Well, I am pleased to say I have secured a pre-order. In fact, we've pre-ordered two for this household. One for me and one for my son for his birthday, which comes about a month after the Switch 2 release. Now, Nintendo did something I thought was incredibly clever to try and foil the scalpers, because we all remember the nightmare that was the PS5 launch back in 2020, and the disaster of the scalpers hoovering all those consoles up with bots on websites, and real fans not being able to get their hands on them, not at reasonable prices. So Nintendo put a limited number of consoles behind an invite wall for their biggest fans. Now, I was hoping to get an invite. I felt like I met the criteria. I didn't get one, so I was a bit gutted when the day rolled around for pre-orders, and I was seeing a lot of activity on various Discord chats that I'm involved in of other people getting their invites and securing their pre-orders. And I thought, this is it. I'm not going to get one now. I looked at various retailers, Amazon, Smiths, whatever your relevant ones are in the UK. Most of them, Currys and all the others, they were accepting in-store. So that was interesting to see. Some, like Currys, were accepting in-store pre-orders. I think Smiths were the same. I was working the day that the pre-orders were going on. I couldn't go out to the shops to do that. But I opened up a stock checking app that I used when I picked up my PlayStation Portal a couple of years ago. And in fact, no, last year. It was just turned last year. What am I on about? Anyway, I opened the app up, and I was surprised to see that the app was reporting Argos in the UK had got stock, and I thought, really? Well, I'll try. Popped over to Argos. They were showing stock. I ran through the order process. The one difference, and I think perhaps why they were showing stock, is that rather than pre-ordering in the truest sense, Argos required you to pay up front, and then you get the supply of the stock when it comes out. So, and maybe that put certain people off. We knew we wanted them in this house, so I ordered one, secured it, and then spoke to my wife and said, do I get the second one if they've got stock? She said, yeah, let's do it. So we went on and we ordered one in her name for my son, and we've got 2 pre-ordered. So I'm hopeful that those pre-orders will be fulfilled appropriately by Argos. I know that quite often retailers let people down with these kind of things, so I'm not going to get too carried away until it's in my hands. But theoretically, I've secured my Switch 2. I also got some accessories. Now, I'd already pre-ordered these before I found the console on Argos. I pre-ordered these through Smith's Toys. So I pre-ordered the Pro Controller we talked about earlier on, and I ordered the third-party camera without realizing the downfall of this device. So if you haven't seen it, it is incredibly cool from a design point of view as a Mario fanboy. It is from Hori, who make a lot of registered third-party Switch devices and accessories. It is the Piranha camera. And effectively, I'll show you on screen now, it is the Piranha. The camera comes out of his mouth, and you can close the Piranha's mouth to close the camera. The neck obviously is your then cable into the hub on the base. But what's really interesting is that the neck and head can be detached and then attached to the Switch separately for use in handheld mode. And I thought, one, the camera, as far as I'm aware, that Nintendo are releasing as the mainline Switch camera doesn't do that. And two, why is this so much cooler looking than the rather boring black and grey thing that has been released to go with the console? I didn't realise, and I hadn't done my proper reading, so hands up, that there is a bit of a difference between the quality of the resolution on the Piranha camera at £35 than the Nintendo official camera at £50. I mentioned it earlier in the video, the official camera is 1080p, and for £15 less you get the cool Piranha, but you also only get 480p on the camera. So it probably won't be suitable for the large gaming efforts that we talked about earlier with the 4 people in a room. I don't really mind that. If that proves to be something that reviewers are raving about and everyone thinks is brilliant, I'll spend £50 on another camera. I don't care. And I'll have the Piranha plant in my office, and I'll just have it there for novelty value when I play the Switch in here on my own. So I don't mind, but in terms of what I've pre-ordered, I've gone for the Pro Controller and the Piranha camera. I do want to secure the GameCube controller from Nintendo directly. Hopefully I'll get an invite at some point in the next few weeks as they start to work through the various tiers of people, or they'll make it open for Switch members to go on there and order. If it doesn't, I'm not that bothered. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm sure the one I've already got will work on the device, and if it doesn't, I'll just play with my Pro Controller. I'm not that fussed. I'm not planning to spend hours and hours on the GameCube library. I own a lot of those games on the GameCube. I'll just play them there. I haven't bought a memory card, as I said earlier on. I will do that when I need it. I'm not anticipating putting loads of games onto this Switch at release, so I'm quite happy to put the games on that I want to play initially, and if I fill that device and feel the need for more storage, I'll buy something at that point. So this video has gone on much longer than I anticipated. I hope you've found it interesting. Like I said, these are just my views. I'm not an expert, just the opinion of a fan. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Did you manage to pre-order one? Were you intending to pre-order one? Do you not care in the slightest? Let me know. What made you excited about the Direct? What did you like about what Nintendo had to say? And what were you disappointed in? What were you hoping they said that they never got round to? Maybe that'll come in the future. Do let me know in the comments below. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. It really helps the channel, support me with what I'm trying to do here, help grow those subscriber numbers. It gets my videos out to a wider audience, and that's really important to me as well. A little reminder about the vote for the viewers' top 5 games of all time. Again, you'll find that link down below. Please do take the time to pop over there, cast your vote, and in a few weeks' time I'll be doing the final video to declare the top 5 games of all time as voted or nominated by my viewers and voted by viewers. So that should be good fun too. Next week's video even is a workshop update, so keep an eye out for that. Making good progress on the Dream Workshop, so check that out next week. And I'll leave you there for now. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.